Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Wisconsin. We just had a dynamite show of Fire Up Michigan, and I get to pull Smoking Jeremy over from one fire up to another. Jeremy gets his doubleheader. Welcome back, Smoking Jeremy, for round two.
Happy to be here.
And we have a couple of fresh faces, two that are not fresh when it comes to this show, but fresh at least tonight. Candy Ebling.
Thanks, Scott. Nice to be here.
And last but not least, Eric Katz. Welcome back.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, well, give me our agenda tonight. We're going to be talking Wisconsin Badgers basketball, Luke Fickel's recruiting job, previewing the Brewers season, and whatever else comes our way. With that said, we'll lead off with Wisconsin Badgers basketball. All right, Eric, give me your insights about this.
Well, for right now, they've gone 3-7 in their last 10 games, and they lost last night 54 to 52 against Northwestern at the Kohl Center. I know this, and they've been 3-7 their last 10 games, and yes, part of that was Tyler Wall missed a few games with an ankle injury, but this was the team last year that won a share of the Big Ten Conference, and this year it seems like they've just fallen backward. And I think what it comes down to is coaching, because I know Greg Gard's been there a while, but last year was the first time Greg Gard had success without Bo Ryan recruited players. So the question becomes is Greg Gard on the hot seat?
Well, is he?
I don't think they're gonna pull a Paul Chryst and fire him in season, because it's a little too late in the season for that. Because who's actually on the bench to take over? It's not like they have their own Jim Leonard, who would be able to who's more than qualified to be a head coach. But I don't think I think they're gonna see how the season plays out. But I'm thinking this: they haven't gone to a Sweet 16 since 2005, 2016, where he took over partially through. They've only gone to the round of 64 and the round of 32. Aside, the past 3 years. Well, it's been 4, but obviously they canceled the tournament because of COVID-19. But my thinking is, unless he makes if he doesn't make the tournament and Wisconsin doesn't go, I'd say you got to start looking at your options and look at the long-term future, because as of late, his offenses have been pathetic. I mean, they cannot shoot. Their shooting percentage is awful. Even when they had like they had probably arguably one of the greatest players in their history, Johnny Davis, last year. That team was still very poor offensively. And with that, looking at the schedule ahead, they got Penn State next week, which should be a win. But last time they only beat them by 3 at the Kohl Center. And then after they play them, they play Nebraska, which Nebraska's a bottom dweller in just about, aside from maybe volleyball, they're a bottom dweller in just about every sport in the Big Ten, which you shouldn't have left the Big 12, because the Big Ten is the Big Ten for a reason, the bigger 10 for that matter. And then they play Michigan at the Kohl Center, which will mark the return of Juwan Howard. But I'm thinking this: if they don't make it, they're going to have to win at least one game in the Big Ten tournament in order for them to have a legitimate chance to get in. Because it seems like a long time ago they beat a ranked Maryland team at the Kohl Center. I get, but they don't really have a player that could carry them. I mean, Chucky Hepburn can only do so much, which he's clearly he's their best player on the team, and obviously when Tyler Wall's in there, they're one of the best teams in the Big Ten. But the thing is, they're playing old basketball. They can't, they can. It's a scoring league, and you can't just win with defense anymore. Especially with how frequently referees these days will want to pretend they're Joey Crawford. But the thing is, they just, I think a new face would help. I mean, this is the same school that fired Paul Chryst despite him winning 72% of his games in his career, and brought in Luke Fickell, which we'll be talking more about him later.
Okay.
But with that, I'd say see how the season ends. If they make the NIT, you got to let them go, because the NIT is, this is the Big Ten. I mean, this is the same team last year that won a Big Ten title. I mean, maybe that bought him a year or two more, but I don't know how much longer you can ride it out with Greg Gard. I think he's reached his ceiling.
Okay, we'll turn over to Candy.
I think this is part of Wisconsin's time to rejuvenate everything, because I think they were under the Barry Alvarez athletic director, hired everybody. Maybe it's time for the new regime and put their stamp on it. I think college basketball has changed. I think the Badgers have always been known for their defense and low scoring games. As far back as I can remember, they don't get the big good shooters, and their offense has been lackluster at best. I mean, they've always been a team where I remember when we were watching them on the TV more regularly than we have recently, how many times that they would have to pass the ball before someone could shoot. You honestly, like, that's how they were coached. You had to pass the ball so many times before you shoot. It's not, run down and get the easy layup or anything like that. I think Greg Gard, he needs to go. I think it's time. I've never been really impressed with his coaching. He was an offshoot. He was Bo Ryan's, pick. And that's why Bo Ryan left in the middle of the season, so that Greg could take over. Kind of a changing of the guard, but I don't think it was enough of a change. And I don't see him recruiting big, good recruits. I mean, remember we used to have the Sam Donaldson, the Frank the Tank back in the day. We haven't had any of those big names, or any of those guys go on to a better career. I think it's time for a changing of the guard.
No pun intended, right? Yeah.
No pun intended, but just saying. It's
all
time.
right, Jeremy, you've absorbed everything between Eric and Candy.
This seems to be a trend with a lot of the teams in the Big Ten, not just Wisconsin. You can look at Michigan State and Michigan. Both of them are playing better defensively than they're playing offensively, just like Wisconsin. They were just talking about it on ESPN tonight. And they were saying all three of these teams basically have to win out, but they all face each other. So one of them's not making the tournament this year. And that's Michigan State's tournament run coming to an end. What has it been? 25 straight seasons for Izzo that he's made the tournament. And then you got Juwan Howard. His team did pretty good his first year and okayed last year. And now this year they're floundering, but they have a better record in the Big Ten than both Wisconsin and Michigan State. That being said, I agree. Wisconsin needs to either improve their recruiting department to get some players that actually know how to score and pass the ball, because that's their problem, is ball handling and scoring. They are turning it over at a tremendous rate this year. And that does not bode well. If your offense is turning the ball over and your defense gets turnovers but can't score because you're averaging, 38.2% from the field, that's not even the 3-point line. That's normally a team's 3-point percentage.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I can say is it doesn't seem like a little long ways away where the Badgers got to a couple Final Fours. My goodness, what a difference it makes. So with that said, I just want to point out that Fire Up Wisconsin can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. So whether you're on the subway, whether you're on your bicycle, walking, hitting the beach, or whatever, feel free to go out there and do that. So please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube. South Florida Tribune, we're striving for 1,000 subscribers. So every subscriber helps. And yes, Jeremy, continue on.
And don't forget, when you subscribe, to like the video that you're watching and share it with all your fans of Wisconsin teams, because that's the only way we're going to grow.
Jeremy's a jack of all trades. He learned well, man. I'll tell you what, he's developed well in the program real well. Well. Hello, Irma Perron, one of my friends over at the Coral Springs Chamber. Thanks for jumping on today. Irma's a very good friend for the Coral Springs Chamber of Commerce, and if you can hear this, Irma, look forward to seeing you when I get back out to some chamber events as a guest. How about that? Will Vogel, let's go ahead and put his And actually, Irma was watching this from LinkedIn. We were able to add some of our platforms, and that was one of them. And yes, what would as far as Will Vogel, hey, yes, bounce to the only see it. Them winning the rest is Minnesota, so we'll leave it at that. All right. With that said, okay, Luke Fickel, recruiting job. All right, Eric.
Well, I will say this though. I mean, before we get into specifics, as soon as Luke Fickel came in, it was, he obviously had all that success at Cincinnati. I mean, he's a Big Ten guy. I mean, we can't use Ohio State because he guided him through a pretty messy time over there for that program, given the aftermath of Tattoo Gate. So we can't really, you can't use that against him because that was just an unfair situation, which I will commend Urban Meyer. Say what you want about the guy now. I do commend Urban Meyer for keeping him on staff as a defensive coordinator because, had he just let him go, that wouldn't have been fair. But man, him coming in has instantly given new life to this Wisconsin Badgers football team. They're calling their spring game the Launch, which is supposed to take place in April. But one thing that I know, this is something Candy and I would complain about day in and day out, is the lack of quarterback. I'm not even sure they've had one for the past few years. But he's attacked the quarterback market pretty hard. He got Tanner Mordecai from SMU. He got Nick Evers from Oklahoma. And then he also got Braden Locke from Mississippi State. And he also is bringing in a brand new offense to the University of Wisconsin. He's bringing in the air raid, which his offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, fun fact is he actually interviewed for the head coaching job at Quincy University before eventually moving up to Division I football, and he's been there ever since. But I'd say the recruiting is just getting started. So far, they got 15 players committed. They've recruited more 4-star athletes than any time during the Paul Chryst era, and they've also taken advantage more of the transfer portal. That's something Paul Chryst never did. You get a guy here and there every now and then. You'd get, Ches Malusi, who, when healthy, has been nice. Although their backfield this year was kind of disappointing because I thought they could go back to the three-headed monster, what it was when they had Melvin, when they had Ingram as well as John Clay and more. But I think that I think overall though they put new life into this program. I think that the athletic director over there, Chris McIntosh, he could see the program was starting to hover. I think he took the lessons from Nebraska instead of letting him go down in the garbage bin. And, he realized that, Paul Chryst had reached his ceiling. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love everything Paul Chryst did for the Wisconsin, both as a player and a coach. But college football, unfortunately, the new college football has passed Paul Chryst by. The transfer portal is becoming a way to go. You can't just get guys via walk-on anymore, like Wisconsin's been known for. And you can't just get guys straight out of high school. But one thing that's impressed me most about Luke Fickell is, when a new coach comes in, they bring their philosophies. It could be bad or it could be worse. He's largely kept some of the principles that Barry Alvarez has, such as attack winning in your own backyard. He still recruits over at the Wisconsin high schools, those big hog molly offensive linemen. He still keeps that in the heart. I know Chris McIntosh is a product of that. But, I think overall though that Wisconsin's going to really benefit. I could see them getting back to competing for Big Ten championships. And I know that, it was a little off this year with Illinois and stuff, but to be truthful, I think they did the right thing. Granted, it was a little sad letting Paul go just because Paul had been there for so long. But, bring in Luke Fickell, going outside Barry Alvarez's coaching tree was the best thing for that program. Keep in mind, though, Chris McIntosh played for Barry Alvarez, and he worked with Barry Alvarez. So he's from that tree. The fact he was willing to go outside and find the guy who fits, a guy who knows the Big Ten, who's coached in the Big Ten. I think he also played in the Big Ten, I believe, for Ohio State. Right. The fact that he was able to find the guy, he still kept to the quote unquote Wisconsin fit, and he upgraded it. So at the moment though, Wisconsin recruiting wise has gone from the Paul Chris flip phone to the latest and greatest smartphone in Luke Fickell when it comes to recruiting.
I'll tell you, Eric, you got some really good analogies. Paul, Chris, flip phone, and I don't think you're going to win any friends out in Nebraska insulting every program on the planet. But I will say, Wilton Vogel says Fickell is a good coach, has a winning percentage of 716. Yeah, I'd say he's done pretty.
I wasn't the one who lost in Ireland to eventual 1-win Northwestern
team. I know, Eric, you're on a roll. You are. I'll tell you, some of your one-liners are really good. So,
but yeah.
All right, Candy, go ahead.
Counting high school players and pickups from the transfer portal, Wisconsin's 2023 recruiting class has 23 players. Fickell has bolstered the receiver position, a position group that he has added 5 players, and offensive line, where there will be 3 newcomers. The Badgers were especially thin on that O-line, where James Durand of Chandler, Arizona, was the only lineman signed during the early December period. Since then, he's added a tackle, Joe Huber, center Jake Renfro. Both players played for Fickell at Cincinnati to bolster a unit that returns a lot of experienced players. I don't care who your quarterback is, especially in college, if you don't have an offensive line that helps them, they're doomed. I don't care which ones you are. I mean, Eric, we haven't had a good quarterback since Russell Wilson transferred to Wisconsin for his last year of eligibility.
In Russ we trust. You remember?
I do, exactly.
Best 9-win team ever.
Hey, listen, I will say one thing, okay? One of the best places I've ever lived is in Chandler, Arizona. I took Candy there for spring training. I showed her some of our hangouts. And I'll tell you, that's a cool place. I've lived a lot of markets over the years. Chandler, Arizona was a great place. I love my time there.
I think Donovan McNabb lives there.
I don't know. We're not going that deep. All I can tell you, Chandler, Arizona, A-OK. Anything else you want to add before I turn over to Jeremy?
I mean, like Eric said, there's 6 quarterbacks that are on the roster, 6 scholarship quarterbacks, signal callers. I just love the fact that we're seeming to get better recruits. And yes, Wisconsin has never been a quarterback-driven college. They've always wanted to go to Ohio State or Alabama and stuff like that. The times maybe are changing. And Fickell will do that. And I think there's a new excitement around the team. I'll never forget the first time Scott was at Badger Stadium. And the third quarter came around and jump around came around. And he was up in the press box. And he thought we were having an earthquake.
Welcome.
I thought that was the coolest thing.
Welcome.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say I never experienced something like that. So.
It's one of the, although I will say though, from doing it after you're done, what they don't show you later is you really feel it in your calves later when you're walking down the sidewalk.
Well, let me tell you one thing. What was what's interesting about that day when we were there, the elevators went out. I had to go down 8 flights of stairs from all those places. That was even harder in there than dealing with that jump around which was a Midwestern earthquake for somebody that never seen it before.
It actually triggered an earthquake in the past.
Yeah, well, all I know is that was a very interesting experience. Folks, if you haven't experienced a Wisconsin jump around, go over to Camp Randall, and you'll find that earthquakes do occur in the Midwest and Madison, even if they're not the kind that most people in California and those other places are used to seeing. All right, smoking, Jeremy, what are you smoking about?
Well, there has been a rich history with Wisconsin football, and right now they currently have 18 players on rosters in the NFL. They also have 3 more that are actually in the free agent pool that were undrafted free agents in the last 3 years that could be picked up by anybody. I believe Bo Benschwagel was the last great guard you guys had. But that being said, I think Luke Fickell was a great hire for Wisconsin. He did good things with Ohio State. And then Urban Meyer comes in, keeps him in as defensive coordinator, and he did a damn good job while he was there until he left to become the head coach of Cincinnati. That being said, he did a good job in Cincinnati. Look at what they did. They were in the college playoffs last year. I mean,
Well, one thing I
Yeah.
can say about Wisconsin football, like every university has their thing. Penn State, linebacker university, lots of places to produce quarterbacks, but we all know full well that Wisconsin churns out running backs quite a bit as well. And they've had a really good history of it. So,
Here's
Rondayne, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor. There's
James White.
James. Yeah, I mean,
Hey, Super Bowl MVP. Super Bowl MVP.
yeah.
hey, they
If you
spit out
played with Tom Brady, you could be a Super Bowl MVP.
yeah,
too.
but you know what? You're right. But I got news for you. One thing I like about James White is pretty versatile, being as a pass catcher as well as what he does up the middle. They've put out some pretty good running backs. So,
and
anything you want to do,
and he had the best ability of any running back, availability.
I mean, he was, but to add to that, I remember seeing a quote by Luke Fickell when this was like the beginning, like when recruiting had just begun at that point. It was kind of the season was be coached in the bowl game, players kind of got a feel for him and whatever, which was smart by Wisconsin for that matter, and it was real classy at the end though, acknowledging everything Jim Leonard did for the program because he didn't have to do that. But one thing he did say, he's like, oh yeah, the quarterback room was thin. I was like, yeah, that's one way to put it. I think that's
non-existent.
I think you were being nice. I think you were being polite, which I can't stand polite.
It was hypothetical.
Probably might have been. It was. We had people. We had somebody under center. It's not like anybody was non-existent. But I think also he's also going to stick to the what Wisconsin does best, which is running the ball. But the fact that it's going to spread guys out more. Last year, Wisconsin did not put their running backs to be in any position to be successful. All Braylon Allen's still going to be Braylon Allen because that kid's just unreal. But now that then with spreading the ball out, instead of Braylon Allen going for 120, 150, he could easily have a couple 200-yard games in there because Wisconsin will now be a threat to throw the ball with this new offense that Luke Fickell's bringing in. I mean, he's still going to stick true to Wisconsin's roots, which is play great defense because after all, he is a defensive guy. But I think Wisconsin lucked out on this one because the job is it a destination job? Yes and no. I mean, depends on really who you ask. I mean, obviously, Brett Bielema, who kind of had a sour ending there, although him and Barry are apparently friends again, so good for them. And then you had Gary Anderson, which was just weird. Yeah. That had to be like the strangest couple seasons ever for a college football team. But, he's still going to keep the roots there. He's not going to get rid of it completely. All he's doing is just tweaking something that needed modernization. Like I go back to the analogy of the Paul Chris flip phone. They had been thinking, oh, the old Big Ten, which is, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, like, Woody Hayes, who used to, pound the ball constantly. But, now college football, it's a passing game now. They, if you need a quarterback in order to even have a chance to win anything. Wisconsin was lucky last year to even go to a bowl game at the rate their season was going, and because they had gotten slaughtered by the University of Illinois, something that hadn't happened since probably before Barry Alvarez became head coach.
Well, to be fair, that's because Illinois never had a defensive back like Devin Witherspoon shutting down half a field either.
Well, they had no one really.
Yeah, let me add one thing to it. When you talk about Brett Bielema, goes to the Southeastern Conference, coaches at a middle-tier school, and finds out how difficult the SEC is. Got smart, returned to the Big Ten. And,
right away.
Well, I'm trying to be polite about it, Eric, okay?
Mm-hmm.
A middle-tier school. Now he seems to have found a good spot in Illinois. So more power to Brett Bielema. I think Wisconsin did a good job. I didn't think Luke Fickell was the guy to get hired, but I guess they thought more of him. Plus, he does get a chance to go into a Big Ten school where at that time, Cincinnati wasn't in one until they end up going to the Big 12. So
I think, although, as much as angry as I was with Brett Bielema for doing what he did on an ugly departure, in his defense, though, he was inheriting a crater that was left by Bobby Petrino and John L. Smith.
No, you're right. Yeah, no, that was a tough spot, and that for sure. And I don't hold anything against Brett at all, but let's face the reality, Eric. Whether it's a crater or it's not a crater, the Southeastern Conference is undoubtedly the best conference in college football. All you have to do is look at how many national championships they've won.
I mean, it's the SEC 1, the Big 10 2, and everybody else is behind them.
Exactly. Yeah. No. So yeah, Eric, but you're right on point. You really are. That he walked into a difficult situation at Arkansas, but he's back in the Big Ten, and you know what?
He's
They
successful.
love him there anyway. So, and meanwhile, it looks like Wisconsin's going to be all right as well.
Uh,
We'll talk about Jim Leonard another night. I don't want to get into that. So any comments that we have or ideas, I want to see how the coordinator situations play out down the road. So we'll save it a couple of weeks.
I think with Brett too. I mean, I think now since obviously years have gone by, I appreciate Brett because after all, that was the last time Wisconsin won the Big Ten championship,
Right.
and they haven't won it without him. And I think Brett also granted you're having a middle of the road SEC team facing up against Alabama every year because in Alabama at that point. I think he faced them too when they had, I think, their best team ever at one point, which had like just everything you could ever want in a college football team. And I think Brett did some great things. He took over for Barry Alvarez and he did a good job. I think he still kept the bull streak going. He still attacked Wisconsin's backyard. And I had no one's say what you will about Brett Bielema. That guy can recruit, and he also knows how to pick. Knows how to pick the right coordinators. I mean, his defensive coordinator Ryan Walters. He just became a head coach. So Ryan Walters did a good job with. He led Illinois to an encouraging 5-7 mark the first year, which nearly got him into a bowl game, and. They, this year, I think had they not had the fall apart late in the season, they would have been in the Big Ten championship. So, and I don't know if they would have beaten, Michigan, just because that's a tough out. But they had a nice year, and I think they're going to be a threat in the Big Ten West.
Well, I'll close it on this thought. Brett Bielema. If you're an Illinois Fighting Illini fan, you got a lot to look forward to. This guy is a really, really super coach. All right, final topic of the night. Well, spring training's not that far away. So, Eric, let's preview the Milwaukee Brewers season, then I'll turn over to Candy and then Jeremy.
Well, David Stern stepped down as the general manager. He's still in the organization as an advisor, but he turned it over to Matt Arnold, who I was fortunate enough to talk to one evening. And and so obviously a lot of changes happened in the offseason. The Brewers traded away Colton Wong and they acquired former Red Star Jesse Winker from the Seattle Mariners, and they also acquired William Contreras from the Atlanta Braves, who was coming off a nice year where he was actually selected to the All-Star game via the final vote, but still All-Star is an All-Star, and he still had a fantastic year. I think they returned just about everyone in their rotation. I think it's going to come down to, can Aaron Ashby take that next step in the back end of it? Can Freddie Peralta go deeper and stay healthy? Because so far, Freddie Peralta hasn't been able to go deep in many games because he does a horrible job at managing his pitch count, and then he also gets a little erratic with his fastball. And obviously, you have Corbin Burns coming back. That's all you need to know there. And then Brandon Woodruff, who had a great second half, despite missing most of the year. He had a fine year for what it's worth. He had a great second half, and he finished the season on a high note. And the Brewers, they had a chance to go to the playoffs last year, but they lost to the Marlins of all teams, even though the Phillies were collapsing at that point, and that's why they were able to clinch.
Well, Eric, trading Josh Hader at the deadline didn't help him well either.
I was getting to that, but yeah, I mean that was a bad move, especially when you're in first place. You don't trade your closer. You got a chance to go for the whole thing. I mean, who knows? The Phillies. I would have laughed at you said if I said the Phillies would fire Joe Girardi and then Rob Thompson would leave him to the World Series. I would have laughed at you.
Well, Eric, we'll just put that in the GMTA stand for Great Minds Think Alike on Hader. All right, Candy.
Uh-huh.
I think last year, a lot of things that could go wrong did go wrong last year. We had a lot of injuries. We had a lot of lack of offense. And honestly, I think They need to work on their bats. They need to work on, it doesn't have to be the long ball or a strikeout. And that's where I think a lot of players miss out. There is nothing wrong with solid base hits and keep hitting, and everybody hit around the lineup. Why do we always have to go for the long ball? All these guys think that they need to have, all they need to do is have power. They want to have all home runs. Stop going for that. Go back to bunting. Go back to some of the basics that got you there. Like, there's a fundamentalness about baseball that is lacking. And I really miss the speed on the bases, the stealing, the bunting, the moving people over, the just basic base hits, the doubles, the triples. You know, it seems in the league lately, it's all down to either pitching, so strikeouts, or it's home runs. And there's hardly any in between. Let the defensive players behind you pick you up if you're a pitcher. The Brewers need really to get back to, I think, and maybe it's the hitting coach. You know, because last year we just, they couldn't get it turned around. Yelich slumped for how much of the year?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love Craigcouncil. He's a good coach. I think some of his coaches underneath him, maybe we need to look at.
Fair enough. Jeremy?
You know, the Brewers, they've got to do something to turn the franchise around with a quickness. They've been floundering, flirting with the back end of the playoffs now, 5 years?
Yeah.
And you can't be going in and getting one and done and then coming out, or even going 2 rounds and out. Your goal should be the championship round this year. Not the World Series, because that's a big leap from where you were. I'm saying you guys should be contending in that division.
I think the NL Central is, like, you know, it's at a place right now where I think the Brewers can contend. I think they'll be relevant. Obviously, you know, what I joke with friends saying the Cardinals are to hitting or what the Brewers are to pitching. You know, that's just how it goes in that division. Cardinals, you know, they kind of are, you know, they don't the Brewers have the pitching. They're loaded there, but then, you know, they don't really have the bats, and the Cardinals got the bats, but not really the pitching. Although Ryan Hensley, their closer, is a good arm in that pen.
Go ahead, Aaron.
But yeah, they I think what's going to come down to this year is, you know, I think one player you got to pay attention to is Garrett Mitchell. A small sample size, a decent look last year, you know, toward later in the year. I like what I see. He's got the speed, and I think also with the shift going away, thank God, a rare win for Rob Manfred. He doesn't get too many of them, so relish them while you can, buddy. I think you'll see the complete hitter return, because the infielders can't be moving all to one side where you supposedly hit the ball the most. But I do put that on the hitters though, for making it go away instead of figuring out. There's a lot of real estate over to opposite field. Poke that sucker in the play, and you might actually get extra bases. Mm-hmm. And I think Craig's a great manager. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, as I say, you know, fire Craig. I'm like, why would they? He'd have a job in a minute later. Somebody would hire him. You put him, if he was in a big market, that team would be winning championships. But Craig gets the most out of what he has. Matter of fact, his first year, he nearly turned the Brewers around and almost led them to the playoffs. If that says so much about him. I mean, he comes from a great manager. He played for a great manager in Jim Leland, which Jim Leland is the guy. There's no nonsense about the guy. This is the same guy who came to blows with Barry Bonds of all people, and got Barry Bonds to back down. Which if that, my friends, is the definition of power.
Yeah.
But I think the Brewers can improve. It's going to really depend on if they can get a turnaround year from Winker. He's hit very well at American Family Field, and actually, when as an opponent of him, annoyingly well against the Brewers. But if they can get him back to at least a great form, not necessarily all-star, because that's a tough ask from where he was last year. But if they can get him back to like at least solid contributing, like 70, 80, 90 RBI, the Brewers might have something there. And with their starting arms, Aaron Ashby makes the jump, as well as you still have Corbin Woodruff, and if Freddie Peralta can get back to what he was in a couple of years prior, the Brewers might sneak into the playoffs, because they've been in the past. They've been that weird team that somehow gets into the playoffs.
All right. The only thing I'm going to say about this is I'm going to piggyback off of Will Vogel. Yelich needs to make a comeback, go back to MVP form. You paid this guy a lot of money, okay, to be your franchise player. And if this guy isn't firing on all cylinders, the Brewers don't have a chance, period. I mean, Christian, it's about time, hold on, Candy, okay, that you start earning your keep. You really do. As far as Craig Council, to me, the guy won a world championship with the Diamondbacks, and he won with the Marlins. So the guy does have a championship pedigree. Go ahead, Candy. You want to say something?
I agree, but the other thing is if you don't have bats around them, all the pitchers have to do is worry about pitching to one batter.
I understand that, but I don't dictate the finances of the Brewers. But
I understand.
Whether this guy needs protection or not, I'm going to piggyback once again off of Will Vogel, okay? Needs to go back to MVP form. And also Ralph Williams, thank you very much for popping in. We appreciate you, Ralph. Been a big supporter for us for a while. So, but meanwhile, yeah, I mean, all right, well, I'm piggybacking off him. That's all I need to do. All right. Well,
I want to piggyback off that too.
Well, I'm going to
because with nobody around him, that means 9 times out of 10 he should be drawing a walk.
Correct.
If he's at MVP form, the plate discipline should be there for him to walk more often than hit. So if he's walking more than he's striking out, I'm good with it. But that hasn't been the case the last season. So getting back to MVP form, it should be 20 home run with nobody hitting around him. I'm just giving out some roundabout stats.
Right. No, that's okay.
He should be hitting about 20 home runs, still get close to 100 RBIs, but he better have at least 50 walks in there and have that be less than his strikeouts.
I mean, with Yelich, I'm going to go by just the here and the now. I mean, the Brewers have kind of made him their leadoff hitter now. Even though they're paying him number 3 hitter money. But, as a leadoff hitter, you got to get on. They need at least a productive Christian Yelich. I'm not saying go 40 home runs and 100 plus RBI. I'm not gonna give him that.
I said 20 and 100. That's an average. That's a good average for a number 1 batter.
I think
20, if you're batting in the one hole, because one hole hitters do hit home runs.
They do
at times. Because somebody throws a meatball practice pitch every now and then where they just salivate and swing at it. But you better make contact. And if it's on a 3-2 pitch and it's up in the zone, make sure it's not dropping just before you swing the bat.
Well,
that's all I got to say.
If Yelich, I don't want to put 100 on Yelich. I just don't think he's that kind of player anymore. I think if you go back, if he gets on and uses his legs, and I think also if you give him as the leadoff hitter, and I think this is a good reasonable expectation. If you give him like 65 to 80 RBI, that'd be a productive year for where he's at in his career. I think.
Eric, maybe so, but let me tell you something. Okay, and the stats nowadays in baseball are what they are. You're still paying him a lot of money. What do you want to do? Go ahead and decrease his salary because we're at the 60 to 85 rule versus 100? You know what? I'm partially with you, Eric, but I'm partially not. Okay.
I talked to a lawyer.
You don't renegotiate contracts unless you're Kyrie Irving, and then you don't want to play anywhere, and then you look like an idiot. And I had to throw that Kyrie Irving criticized.
I want out.
Well, I know, but I'm not trying to get off point here. But the reality is Yelich needs to up his game, and he needs to up it for the Brewers to even have a puncher's chance. And we'll leave it on that note. All right, we're going to go to parting shots. You know what, Jeremy? You can lead off this time.
Well, I'm going to change it. I'm going to go with a grammar subject.
Okay. Just
because I just saw it and I had to reply to it. Now, remember, when teams lose, it's LOSE. It is not they loose. The only thing they loosen are their shoelaces or neckties or their chin straps. So therefore, make sure you know the difference. It's 1 O and lose. It's 2 O's and loose.
Well, my goodness, if that isn't the most interesting grammar lesson I've seen in all these broadcasts, it is what it is. But then again, I have to tell you, in the last week, I'm not going to divulge any information. I've seen a lot in the last week, including one analyst is drop off and never come back. So, in the wonderful world of nevers, okay, I had this guy about a week ago, just came on the show 15 minutes. He did a good ideal David Copperfield. And what do you think he does? Never came back, never gave me an explanation why, which is why in baseball the word out is a commonly used adjective, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, Eric, give me your parting shots.
You know, with the Brewers this year, it's going to come down to, can Aaron Ashby make that next step in the back end of the rotation, because they're paying him to be a starter. They're not paying him to be a long reliever. Otherwise, you can go on the market and pay a guy major league minimum, and he'll hopefully give you some nice outings. Also, Yelich, buddy, you can't be going up there producing 10, 11 home runs and striking out as much as you do. That's what we call annoying and not productive. And then, Freddy Peralta, man, you got to get back to close to whatever you were, because, the Brewers need you. And then obviously, Corbin and Brandon keep doing what you're doing, I guess. But in order to contend in that division, a lot's got to go right for that team. And those are a few key factors that should be paid attention to next week in Arizona.
Very good. All right, Candy.
Kudos to Marquette's basketball team.
Yeah.
The men's basketball team have won 5 straight games and tied with Xavier for first place in the Big East standings. The Golden Eagles, 19-5, 11-2 in the Big East, keep moving up the national rankings. The Golden Eagles checked in today at number 10 in the Associated Press top 25. Marquette was ranked number 14 last week. They first entered the AP poll this season on December 9th. Last time they were ranked was back in the 2018-19 season, where they spent 4 weeks at number 10. Kudos, keep going, and good luck, Marquette.
All right, my parting shot, I got a couple. Number one, Aaron Rodgers, if that football thing doesn't work out, you can always take up golf, because he did win the Pro-Am at Pebble Beach. Okay, so Aaron.
Who was his partner? Wasn't it Ben?
I don't know off the top of my head. So, but anyways, he did win his part. So if the Jeopardy thing didn't work out, you can always take up golf. And if that doesn't work out, guess what? You can go to Las Vegas and join your buddy Davante Adams. As we know right now, there could be one good recruiting job from Adams to bring Rodgers over to Sin City. And you know what? May not work out, but the question is, can Mark Davis afford him? Well, stay tuned for another edition of Fire Up Wisconsin, and we'll let as the drama surrounding Aaron Rodgers go. So I don't know. The Edge of Night used to be one of a very interesting soap opera. We'll just call it The Edge of Aaron Rodgers. So there you go. So.
You say The Edge of Aaron Rodgers. I think watching him, it's as the stomach churns.
Oh, you're good.
I call it Keeping Up with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I don't know. Eric's not bad, but I like the one Jeremy threw. That was pretty good. The Edge of Aaron Rodgers in Sin City. I don't know. We can have all the analogies, but don't think in a million years that Davante Adams missed Rodgers in the worst way. He's trying like heck to get him over to Las Vegas.
Obvious, he does.
Or we could make it a dramedy and call it "I Need to See a Manager" and call it Karen Rodgers.
Oh, Jesus!
Let's not go there.
No,
go there.
I did. I'm sorry, too late.
No, that's okay. No, but really, I think after a year apart, the appreciation level for Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers might be a lot better than we all think. So, this, Fire Up Wisconsin. My name is Scott Morganroth, joined by Candy Ebling, Smoking Jeremy B., who is now a Wisconsinner by show trade, and Eric Katz, who happens to live there. So glad you joined us tonight. So with that said, Eric, let everybody know how they get a hold of you.
You can follow me on my Twitter at Sports Team News, where I talk all things baseball. And then you can also follow me on my blog at bellyupsports.com, where I talk about all things baseball too.
Very good. All right. Smoking Jeremy.
Well, I do a podcast about that rival team that swept y'all. Let me tell you about it. Kneecap biting with Smoking Jeremy B., where I cover the Lions in the NFL. I also have my Twitter, which is at Ballreg Jeremy or at Smoking Jeremy B. You can find me on either one. And you can find me right here with the South Florida Tribune, writing underneath the Motor City Tribune and those list of authors. And I'm on all these fire up shows. Whatever he wants me to fire up, I'll do it.
Yeah, I can hardly tell. You're, Robert Redford is a natural. Jeremy, in the short time you've been the unnatural, becoming into a natural. So that's a compliment. So if you can figure that out, you're good. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Candy, do all the particulars for us.
So I first want to thank everybody that has participated in the chat room. Will Vogel, thank you. Irma Perrone, thank you. Terry Osowski, thank you. And Ralph Williams, thank you. If you like this show, we have many more like it. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Watch Fire Up Michigan, Fire Up Florida, Inside the Pigskin, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, Sports Exchange, Real and Rare, No Limits. Did I forget any?
And soon.
Well, if I did, catch the channel, subscribe, and look for it. Otherwise, go to our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. If you have show ideas, email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you'd like to sponsor, or if you would like to have your own show, contact us either by email, southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Call Scott, 954-304-4941. We would love to have either you subscribe or your own show if you are so inclined. Scott, your Tribune at Tribune South for Twitter.
Good job, Candy. I'm telling you, this girl's come a long way. One thing I like about people that we've been able to bring on here is they're in our system and they've all done great with every show. So, I have the ideal crew that justified. Candy's come a long way. She's on all the time. Eric Katz will be coming on baseball again in the next few weeks or so. I know baseball's his sport. 108 Stitches Baseball Talk will be returning in just a matter of a couple of weeks. And Jeremy, well, you're all over the place. So what can I say about you, man?
I just do what I do, man.
Yeah, and you do what you do. No, Jeremy, improving as a writer, but more importantly, what I like about you is you improved on every show as a broadcaster as well. So proud of each and every one of you, as well as everybody else that participates on this platform. So with that said, okay, that wraps up this edition of Fire Up Wisconsin. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. So on behalf of Candy Ebling, Eric Katz, Smoking Jeremy B, my name is Scott Morganroth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up, and we will catch you the next time. Take care, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you once again in a couple of weeks. Bye now.
Spade new to your pets.